Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition of PM Clips. This series of videos will focus on the concept of project scope management and what we will do once we've created the project charter. One of the project manager's main responsibilities is to ensure that only the needed work, which is the scope, will be performed and that the final output can be completed in the allocated time and making sure that it is within the budget. And he has to do this throughout the duration of the project timeline. So to ensure that is done smoothly, the PM should pin down the parameters of the project. What should be done and what shouldn't be done. But sometimes identifying what is supposed to be done, or at least should be done, is in itself already a challenge, as what you can see in the Dilbert comics. The strip highlights the common problem a PM will encounter in any project. Not all clients know what they want. So what is this needed work to be done? We call that needed work to be done the scope. So the scope is the work that needs to be accomplished to deliver a product, service, or result with the specified features and function. Take note of one very important word there. That word is specified. That implies that we have to be able to identify and document what needs to be done. As a caveat, there are two terms that can sometimes cause confusion: product scope and project scope. While the term scope refers to the overall goal of any project, these two forms of scope are less clear-cut. Any confusion for a beginner in project management is understandable, particularly since the two forms of scope do work together in some ways. So let's start off with the product scope. The product scope can be defined as the features or characteristics of a product itself. Okay, the final product, the final service that the project aims to achieve. Whether considering design, function, or component parts, the key point is that the project's product scope refers to the actual tangible product. In contrast to the product scope, the project scope focuses on the various steps taken to deliver a product or service. Project scope can include, among other things, the assembly lines, the budget, the staff training, your supply chain, the personnel allocations to the project. Basically, it refers to anything that is needed in order to arrange the production or implementation of a good product. So let's take one specific example. Let us say that as a project manager, you are tasked to provide a new data center for the Ateneo. In this case, the product scope would include the tangible details of the final deliverable. So what is part and parcel of a data center? This could include the computers, the servers, the office space, making sure that there's connectivity, the software is also there. The overall product in this sense is the data center itself, and the product scope consists of the component parts that together make up the data center. So that's the product scope. What is the project scope? Um, when you talk about the project scope this time, this would focus more on the process of getting from the empty space to a fully functioning data center. So it would include corresponding with contractors and designers, asking them, oh, how are we going to set up and design the data center. It might include acquiring each and every physical part that was mentioned in the product scope. So the ordering process, the documentation that you need for that ordering process is also part and parcel of the project scope. Providing project documents to managers and team members and setting overall budgets and timelines for final delivery is also included in the project scope. It sounds like that we have to do a lot of things, right? So how in the hell do we ensure that we will only do what is supposed to be done? We do this through the scope management process. We also have a document that comes out of this process. We call that document the scope document. This documentation generally explains three things: the parameters of the project, what is included in the project, what is excluded in the project, the responsibilities of each team member, including the client, what do we expect the client to do, what is their involvement in the project, do we want to make sure that they have to approve the requests that we make as quickly as possible, and quickly may be defined as within 2 days, within 3 days. And finally, it should also include the procedures for how a work that is completed will be correct, and that is verified, and it passes critical scrutiny of the stakeholders, and that is the approval process. So essentially, during the scope management process, as per the project management body of knowledge or the PMBOK, you are supposed to do 5 things. Well, 6. The first thing is that you need to plan, you need a plan, a process, or an operating model to handle the scope. That is your plan scope management. The second one is you need to gather requirements. The third one is once you've gathered all of that requirements, you use that to craft your scope and create what we call a work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure breaks down or decomposes the whole project into manageable chunks. Once you've created the work breakdown structure, that informs the other parts of your project plan. So these first 4 steps focuses on the planning stage of project management. The next 2, which is validating scope and controlling scope, you do that as the project is being executed. Along the way, there might be some changes to the scope. You need a process in order for you to determine whether you are going to approve a change of the scope or reject a change to the scope. If you had more time or this was taught in a regular face-to-face situation, I'd like to delve deeper into the plan scope management activity. But since this is not possible, let me just give an overview. What happens during this stage of the scope management process? So during the plan scope management activity, which is the first step in the scope management processes, your task would involve, and this is not a whole complete list, but it gives you a sense of what you should do, is 1, how will you gather requirements and turn them into scope? Will you gather the requirements through an FGD, a survey, an interview? How many people are you going to interview? Once you're at the stage of turning it into a scope, what will your scope statement and baseline look like? How will you articulate them? What tools will you use? Will you use a template? Will you use a narrative? Will you use a diagram? In your case, your scope statement is already embedded in your project charter. And that's just one aspect of your scope statement. Um, you will also need to ask yourselves in and place it in your scope management document. What will be your process for validating deliverables against certain standards? So if you have a certain deliverable and you say that this in let's say the data center, the deliverable is your HVAC, your what do you call that? Your humidity, your vacuum, and your air conditioning. How do you validate that the temperature inside the data center meets certain standards? Do you simply ask a data center expert, or do you match it against documents of best practices which outline what are the standards of the ideal temperature inside a data center? The last one, and this is just an example, how will you control change? Okay, and if ever there is a change, what is the process that you will use to manage these changes in the scope? Will you just need one approval, or will you need the approval of multiple people? Who will be approving any changes to the project? Would be an example of a question that you will answer here. So why is there a need to spend a big amount of time going through this scope management process and creating the scope document? What and there's only one reason. You want to manage what they call a scope creep. It's also known through other terms, a requirements creep or a feature creep. And this refers to sometimes the not sometimes but always the project's requirements tending to increase over the project life cycle. Sometimes it is deliberate. Sometimes the project team doesn't know that they're doing scope, that they're already having a scope creep because they keep on adding and adding new features and functions to the project. Or maybe there are external factors influencing it, like a new technology starts coming in, and that becomes the standard of the whole industry. That's why you need to adjust your project. Take note, if these things happen and you don't have a proper process to manage the scope, this is one surefire way that your project will fail. So let's take a very specific example. Let's assume that you're the project manager of a software development team, and your software project initially, after going through the planning process, has been estimated by top management to be finished in 6 weeks, and in that 6 weeks, you are just going to deliver a product with 4 features A, B, C, D. 2 weeks into the software development project, your key stakeholder sees the product with features A and B already complete. And because he came from this wonderful seminar, he suddenly says, you know, after going to that seminar, I'm inspired. We'd like to put uh, function E into the project. Now, if you're not very careful and just say yes, because this is a key stakeholder and he's saying he wants to include something, your tendency is you will accept. Boom, what happens? You already now have a scope creep. Okay? Actually, even before you say yes, the fact that someone comes in and that someone is a very key stakeholder requesting for an addition to your project already indicates that there's a possibility that the scope creep comes in. So what would you do? If you want to think about it first, pause the video before you continue on. So you might have come across a lot of solutions in your mind. Some of them you would say, yes, we accept. Some of them you would say immediately, no, you'll not accept. Or no, or yes, we will accept only if you add budget or time, additional budget or time. Now, that is a little bit a hasty decision. a better process, and this could already be done immediately when you could have thought of this at the time that you develop the scope document, would be any requests that are going to be made with regards to any additional feature or changes. What could be done is you ask them to submit a proposal. That proposal is what you call a request for change. Once that comes in, you now sit down with your client, with your key stakeholders and the project team, and discuss what would deliver more value to the project. Continuing the project as is and completing C and D, or putting in E. If it means that E, when you put it in, delivers more value, then it is higher now compared to project C and D. Then that ends up as the new project scope. If E does not contribute any additional value, then you should not consider it. And once you discuss all of those possibilities, make sure that everyone agrees to the decision. And once it's agreed, everything is signed off, that ends that situation that potentially could have resulted in a scope creep. So to summarize, what have we learned so far? Well, three things. One, what is a scope? And we need to be able to differentiate between a project scope and a product scope. Two, what is the project scope management? What does it entail? What are the activities involved in project scope management? And three, why do we do project scope management? So this is Sir Olpo, thanking you for watching this special edition of PM Clips. This is the first video in a series of videos about project scope management.